Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Mini Metro. This time will be another attempt of the green, orange, red, and blue achievement, which is deliver 1,600 passengers in Montreal using no more than 4 lines. So I did do an attempt video before where I basically declared that it was close enough, and then for some reason I just thought, why not just try this again, record, and because basically what I'm doing now is that I'm just sort of just staying quiet and letting my recording program run in the background while I play these games, and then if I get a successful run, then I will basically just do post commentary, record it, and then put it up on YouTube, because there's been quite a number of failed attempts at this achievement. And definitely for some of the much harder ones, because the New Zealand one is making me, let's just say it's taking me probably more about 10 to 20 runs, and I still haven't got anything even remotely close to the actual number for the achievement, but I don't quite remember anyway. So the fact that remains that we can only use 4 lines just basically means that we need to emphasize on utilizing our locomotives and our carriages in basically more efficiently, and on top of that, we need to have a solid number of tunnels as well to manage extending those lines to train stations that may spawn across the rivers or such. So, and I think one of the strategies I mentioned before is that since we're restricted to 4 lines, what we can do to start with to make like our future life a bit easier is to grab 4 lines as soon as possible, and that basically means all you need to worry about is rearranging the lines, and so that in future weeks, especially if you have to choose between a line and something else, you can just choose the other object and then just sort of or basically just like use the other resource to your advantage rather than picking up something that's essentially, well, dead weight. I mean, it's like even like say if you've got a bunch, even like say if you have to choose between a line and a tunnel, and you may have plenty of tunnels already, sometimes the additional tunnels will actually be more convenient in the long run. So yeah, this is at the end of week 3, and well, actually I still haven't gotten my 4th line yet, but my thinking at this point was that let's try and see how far we can get with 3 lines. Then we'll grab the 4th line if we need it. So it's definitely one of those things that yeah, it's pretty much a decision choice. I think it's really dependent on how comfortable you are with testing the boundaries and how much, like, given some amount of resources, how comfortable you are with managing with what you have and testing the limits of what you have. So it's definitely something that, at least for me, is something that I do by feel at the moment. I feel that trying to run any hard numbers or making any actual written observations kind of just detracts from the enjoyment of the game, because it becomes more like a scientific experiment, that sort of thing. And I do plenty of that with my other hobbies, and admittedly games for me are definitely something to just indulge something that I just like to relax a bit more than usual. So one of the things about just having 4 lines is that for me, or at least in this example, I found that utilizing loops really helped me out a lot, and it's definitely something to keep in mind. Having the loops is really handy, especially if you've got a good distribution of stations, like if you've got a good mix of stations sitting next to each other. Like, for example, like say having the 3 circle stations on the left of the orange line, that's not a good mix, but as you can see with the yellow line, I've attached the triangle to a circle, then to a square station, so there's a good mix of different stations, which allows the customers to sort of just flow and to let the train flow with minimal congestion happening. So Definitely, maybe as some previous week, I could have just picked up a fourth line and just sort of done that job to make it a bit easier on myself. But I think at this point it was not really something that I was too worried about. Although definitely with on the green line, when you've got that circle station spawning on the island, which basically means you kind of just need to waste another tunnel for the time being, which for some people is definitely one of those very contentious things that understandably for some people they would prefer to restart the game rather than try to deal with an annoying lack of tunnel. But this one I sort of just took it in stride, because as you can see I've still got an excess of tunnels that still need to be used, and so now it's the end of week 5, and I can't quite remember which one I picked, but I wouldn't be surprised if I picked the line. Yeah, that's exactly what I did, because going back to my logic before, in that if I just jump straight to 4 lines, then there's one less thing I need to worry about in future weeks. So now I should probably point out that I recorded this quite a while back actually, so there's definitely some mistakes or some not so perfect moves that I've done that I've definitely improved on in future runs. Like say for example, if you look at the orange on the top right, I could have definitely adjusted the orange line to ensure that there is a smoother like you can see how at the circle segment, or did I say it was a teardrop? I'm gonna call it a teardrop. If you see the unique teardrop station on the top right for the orange line, you see the line sort of doubles up on itself. That is something I could definitely have rearranged, because as I've been advised, that the steeper the angle, the longer each locomotive takes to turn. So while it still feels very minimal, it still makes a fairly, I guess when it adds up, it makes a fairly significant difference. But this is not something I've tested. This is not something I'm willing to test for the sake of like actual scientific accuracy, because that's something that will detract from the enjoyment of the game. So while I'm still sort of just looking out and correcting those mistakes as I see fit, I'm more content to take other people's advice on it and just to correct it rather than try to figure it out and test it out for myself. I still sort of just haven't really been able to see any objective results, but I feel that's probably caring a little too much about the game, really. The other thing that can definitely sort of do a bit of testing in terms of observations and boundaries is that since each line can only have a maximum of 4 locomotives, I actually don't know about the number of carriages in addition to the locomotives, but that's definitely one thing to keep in mind, because because by maxing out a line with all 4 locomotives on it, it gives you a good idea of how many stations you can have, as well as like how many sort of interconnecting lines that you need. So that's definitely one thing to sort of look out for and to also get a feel for. So obviously on the orange line I've got 4 locomotives, one with an additional carriage, and so for now it seems to be working itself pretty cleanly, and but definitely there is a bit of congestion happening on the green line, in which I just added an additional carriage to the locomotive without a carriage, and that should just sort of straighten out some of the congestion issues there. So on the yellow line, I'm just thinking, okay, I currently got 2 locomotives on the yellow line, and I'm just thinking, okay, and then I threaded okay, so one thing I want to point out is that if you look at the start station, which the orange and yellow line are crossing through, one of the strategies you can do is that if you cross the lines at unique stations, which, like say for example, if I connected the yellow line to the orange line at some other station, star passengers spawning on the yellow line would still have to wait on the orange line to be transported, which can cause further congestion issues, especially given that the orange line is already fairly long. dealing with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 stations over 4 locomotives. Even though I've got them traveling in opposite directions, even though I've got a carriage on one of them, it's definitely one strategy to keep in mind for reducing congestion in that regard. So we've got another unique station, a Pentagon station spawning on the top left, in which the yellow line is doing a great, I'm just gonna commend myself, as self-centered as that sounds, to actually structuring my yellow line such that it's in a situation where I can actually handle the stations spawning on these outside areas. So finally, I'm putting my 4th line to use, which is actually quite something to note, because it sort of made me realize, my trains are getting a bit stressed out. I should probably, help them out. Just give them the blue line. Use my blue line, which was still being unused, and basically take the stress off the other lines. I don't think I really had any sort of major structure in mind as to how I was pre-planning to have my lines, because generally I found that sort of like preparing a plan beforehand can sometimes result in disasters, especially when train stations don't really spawn in the areas that you want them to. So it definitely can be a bit of a problem, and in my opinion, that's sort of just how I realized that I should just play this game, just adjust to the flow, keep some general but adaptable strategies in mind, instead of trying to go in with a plan and say, okay, I'm going to establish a loop between this and that islands, these and those islands, and yeah, because it's it obviously becomes a bit too rigid if you try to stick to the plan too much. And so being able to being flexible and sort of having a good idea, which can only really be accrued through experience, of how to adjust to different scenarios, is definitely more important, in my opinion, to sort of just maintaining or just really just getting through a game and aiming for these kind of achievements. So if we look at the yellow line now, we're sort of in a good situation for it to actually contribute to a loop, and I'm pretty sure by the end of the video I have the blue line also into some kind of loop. And in relation to what I said before about the orange and yellow line meeting at the star station, I sort of did a similar thing with the blue line and the orange line meeting at the square station. But now that we've got a circle station spawning on the left, in which I'm sort of a bit stuck on trying to figure out how to use my limited bridges in order to accommodate that station on its own. Let's see. Just trying to remember what I did back then. So we can see me adjusting the yellow line, the blue line a little, and it's not a very nice angle there. So so I'm watching myself. I've just removed the yellow line, and I'm trying to. I don't remember what I did because I recorded this like a week ago, and only now I'm commentating on it. So, alright. So it looks like I'm sort of establishing a loop around the yellow line, and with enough tunnels, which is actually quite nice. It's also got the benefit of not making the yellow line as long, which means that I can definitely sort of just move. Which basically means the locomotives that have an easier time moving around, and that since the blue line is short enough, I can definitely extend it a little more in order to deal with some of the more outer stations on the top. So far, the orange and green lines don't seem to be giving me any grief, which is quite satisfying. Takes a load off my mind as I'm just sort of scanning the whole surface atmosphere. And certainly some of the stations spawning are definitely giving me a bit of grief in terms of sort of just the angles, as I mentioned earlier, and because you can definitely see in the middle with the blue line that the angles are a bit awkward, and but right now at the time I couldn't really think of a better solution, mainly because it's important for the blue line to still be attached to another train line, so that some of the unique customers spawning on the blue line can at least be transferred to the other stations in some way or other. So let's see, what am I doing? I'm adding another locomotive to the yellow line. I also attached the carriage to the blue line, and I'm not gonna lie, I actually can't see much that is wrong or overly I can't really see much that is overly like terrible. And so in spite of that, it's just really that bit at the blue line at the top where the angles are a bit weird, but everything seems to be trucking along smoothly. I seem to have gotten a good allocation of locomotives and carriages onto each of the lines, and we seem to be handling most of the customer spawns fairly well. I don't recall that I don't think I've actually extended the orange line any further than that, so that's sort of like I guess for me that's an indication of like how much it's able to handle for the time being. Definitely it will get more, definitely things will get a bit more congested, heavy, crowded. So at this stage I'm getting fairly close to 1600, having broken 1300. So as you've noticed already, I've slowed down the speed so that I can better assess each of the stations and ensure that I don't lose due to overlooking a crowded station. So as you can see, I just moved the yellow line, the sort of like the connecting yellow line to the orange line to the square station, mainly because I realized that the square stations are fairly restricted, and that's sort of here's another thing that I actually picked up on. If you look at where the yellow and the blue line meet in the middle, notice how there's always a bunch of square stations being dumped there from mostly the blue line, but the advantage is that the train coming from left to the right on the yellow line can easily pick up all the square customers and deposit them at the next station. That's definitely sort of just one of those very small optimization features that you can definitely take advantage of if you see the opportunity to do so. And that definitely clears up that definitely is something that combined with a good distribution of stations on each line can definitely help out a lot with keeping the stations fairly congestion free. Alright, so moving on, I'm just about to break 1500, which is, things are starting to look a little tense now, with a lot of customers spawning on stations on the orange line. We've just hit week 10, and as per my usual strategy or usual preference for sort of just doing things in a way so that I don't have to think about other things, having my 4 lines basically means that the decision made at the end of week 10, which was just basically choosing the carriage, is pretty much made for me. So that's, again, I cannot stress enough how important, or maybe it's that I really do value peace of mind and having less things to worry about so that you can focus your attention on other things, because it's very easy to multitask. But I find that the problem with multitasking is that you end up worrying about everything. And sometimes it's just better if you have less things to worry about in order to do well, or to shift your attention and focus onto other aspects. And this is where or at least this is the idea that influences, I guess, probably my general type of strategy when it comes to playing this game. So things are getting a bit tight. I'm at 1590 with 10 more customers to go, and I'm doing pretty well. And well, I like to think I'm doing pretty well. I'm pretty sure some people would say otherwise. There's still some fairly awkward angles on the blue line. At this stage, I was just pretty happy to have broken 1600. So At this stage, I kind of just got lazy and sort of relaxed at that point, but you can definitely see me micromanaging one of the trains on the Orange Line just to deal with that congestion happening. Thankfully, there's also another train to help ease that congestion, but definitely the 3 circle stations in succession on the left part of the Orange Line were definitely not helping, and it's safe to say that this challenge is definitely tuned such that things will start getting difficult once you almost hit 1600, and then after that it becomes either a very slow game of micromanagement or I want to say impossible, but I'm pretty sure for some determined people it's not that impossible. But I know that now that I've gotten my achievement, I'm just like absolutely done with it. So it's like my patience is running out, and at least for me, even though I'm not really much of an achievement kind of person, like I've sort of just found this game that sort of just peaks, sort of just really appeals to my need to problem solve. So yeah, I've broken 1600. I'm pretty happy, and I'm really glad that I managed to get this achievement. So with that, thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.